events of the past weeks and then of the past several days have had a big impact, or could have and should have and will have a big impact on the arc of history, global history, American history, and the history of the left, in my view. But I'll hear what my next guest has to say. The pandemic exposes some fundamental crises and flaws in our economic system. And of course, the decision of Bernie Sanders to suspend his campaign means that the most successful Democratic Socialist candidate for president in American history is now not an active candidate. And who better to talk about both of these things with us, I thought, than Maria Svart. Maria is National Director of Democratic Socialists of America. She is a longtime American activist and observer, as well as participant in the American left. So without any further ado, Maria Svart, thanks for coming back on the program.
Of course. Thanks for the invitation.
Always. And let's start. Well, let's start with a more concrete event, maybe broaden out as time permits. So Bernie Sanders has my old boss, you guys who are backing him, is now out of the presidential race. And I've said repeatedly, if Bernie had won, we'd have to mobilize and fight for change. If Biden wins, we'll have to mobilize and fight for change, etc., but in different forms. So first of all, your thoughts and if you care to speak for DSA's thoughts on the ending of the Bernie campaign.
So it is a very difficult day, and yesterday was a very difficult day for many of us in this country. The work that Bernie has been doing the last few weeks as we've been in this pandemic and seeing either really horrific responses from the federal government or less effective responses from some of the Democrats has really brought home how important Bernie is. It's not just that he brought together what were many existing strands of movements that had been started years ago, whether in Wisconsin or Ferguson or in New York at Occupy Wall Street, or more recently, just bringing new people into the political process and what he did with empowering small dollar donors and inspiring new people and young people to vote. It's been a really difficult time, but at the same time, he did permanently change American politics, and I believe he will continue to do so. So it's been the last 24 hours now have been a time of reflection and a lot of grief and sadness. But at the same time, we know that we've come so far from just a few years ago, and we know some of our toughest fights are ahead of us. So we need to keep fighting. And the spirit that Bernie brought to the presidential campaign, we're going to continue in DSA, at least in our organizing in workplaces and in communities, even in this time where we have to be physically distant from each other. So our analysis is that we have so much to be grateful to Bernie for, but, the last few weeks, he's really shown what leadership should look like. And his whole campaign embodied this idea that we are in charge of our own destiny and we have the power if we organize. So he recognized he was part of a continuum of people building the left in this country. And we need to recognize that and carry the torch forward.
Maria Svart, I really appreciate that comment. And I've been reflecting on this a lot. I also feel that, especially in recent weeks, where he's diverted his fundraising machine to frontline responders to the pandemic and so on. I've felt, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. One, I know that you understand power, and that, the highest ideals in the world, if they don't eventually result in some sort of power to change things, are not all that valuable. So I want to put this in that context, but I feel strongly that one of the great things that the left brings to, and the real left, I mean, I'm not talking about the, what CNN calls the left, but the left brings to the conversation is not just better policies for everyone, but the ability to model in its own governance, in its own conduct, in its own language, the language of collaboration, the language of comradeship, the language of and behavior of community. I think, for example, of AOC when she was debating. I'm blanking on his name now. I've already deleted it from memory. Her opponent, and he tried to pull a trick on her, saying, "I'll endorse you if you win. Will you endorse me if I win?" And her answer was, "I'm part of a movement. I want to talk to the movement about it before." I mean, a million ways. I think Bernie did reflect that sense that it's not me, us, which means many different things, including, it can be problematic sometimes, but a shared approach to working together, deciding together, and going forward together. Does that make any sense to you?
Absolutely. The last few weeks reached, I would say, the values of democratic socialism and the specific ideas, the ideology of democratic socialism, and the need to change our system, to transition to a democratic socialist system, was validated to even more people than already supported Bernie just by what's been happening under COVID. And so this idea that we're all in this together, collective problems should be addressed collectively with collective solutions. The concept of solidarity, the least among us, is what any one of us could be if we don't take care of each other. All of these things, you see these ideas, the very ideas that the mainstream establishment, used to discredit Bernie during the primary campaign are now becoming so clear, and the end results of having a system, a neoliberal system that's all about individualism, which is promoted by Democrats. A lot of Wall Street Democrats promote this idea. The logical result of that under Trump has become very deadly clear to many more people than already knew about it. And some people are seeing things like, my own governor here in New York, Andrew Cuomo, cutting billions of dollars from healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. And he looks stately and calm on TV, but he's being very neoliberal himself. So the left has very important ideas. It's really upon us to seize this moment, to make that connection and point out that some of the things that even mainstream pundits are talking about in non-socialist language is actually rooted in socialist ideology. And then the other thing I would say is, to your point about power, the reality that no one is going to look out for us unless we do, I think has also been brought home to more people than it had previously. When you see grocery workers and transit workers and sanitation workers and healthcare workers, because of decisions made at the top, whether federal, state, or their main employer, having to put their lives on the line has really galvanized a lot of people to realize that the only power that's truly capable of addressing that is their own collective power. And so you're seeing a lot of collective action from workers in workplaces as well. So I think we're in a moment where the stakes are so incredibly high that the ideas of the left are validated. And it's not just people demanding PPE. It's not just people trying to raise concerns about, where are the ventilators, but it's also people making proactive demands about taking care of each other. Like when General Electric workers are demanding that their factories be transitioned to make ventilators. So it's not just that Trump is pitting states against each other for life-saving equipment that should be centrally managed. It's actually that workers are saying, we have the power, we demand the power, we can serve human needs in our society if we control the means of production. And these are ideas that as I said, were used to discredit Bernie, but now are becoming self-evidently clear to a lot of people.
Well, they are, and I totally agree. And again, we're talking with Maria Svart, who is the National Director of Democratic Socialists for America. And Maria, just on a personal note, I guess I have three emotions that keep cycling through. One is optimism, because I think this moment is almost like an X-ray flash showing millions, perhaps billions of people the flaws in the current system. Another is fear that we won't seize this moment to adequately explain what people are seeing and what they can do about it. And I got to be candid. The third is, I get these flashes of anger when I look at a stimulus package that if you break down the numbers, more than 90% of it goes to corporations, the same corporations that put us in this mess with their negligence and greed. So I guess where I'm coming out with that is, what are your thoughts on how we can, and by the way, I also want to say there are those who are saying, wow, the left is trying to politicize this moment. Well, you're in action. If you're not on the left or anywhere else, if you claim to be a technocrat or a centrist, that is an ideologically driven decision you're trying to pretend is not. So let's not play that game. So I guess having said all that, Maria, what are your thoughts on how this moment can be best used as a teaching / organizing / mobilizing moment?
Yeah, it's so difficult because we're either forced to go into dangerous workplaces in this moment, or we're forced to stay home in a moment that feels, excuse me, very dangerous. So, normally the normal human reaction when you are threatened, and that's what Trump is doing. Trump is directly threatening all of our lives and killing thousands of people. Your normal reaction is a fight or flight response. Mm-hmm. And right now, the avenues to fight are not very clear. And also, there's nowhere to flee to, because to protect yourself, you have to isolate. So psychologically, it's a really difficult moment for people. So the avenues to fight, it's really, the emotions that you cycle through are the same emotions that I cycle through. When I sometimes I have dread about the future. Usually that's combined with anger, but sometimes you just let the fear wash over you, and that's important to do. But I also have hope because I do see people finding ways to take collective action, and I see opportunities to reach even more people. So just to give a couple of examples, for folks that are isolating at home, you may have seen in a lot of parts of the country, people are going out at 7 o'clock at night and clapping to celebrate healthcare workers. And I think it's important to expand that to really anybody who's out there at risk. In New York City, the news today or in the last couple of days has been that transit workers are dying at a very disproportionately high rate, for example. And a lot of the poor and working class communities in New York, which are the Black and brown communities, are the communities where public employees and also undocumented immigrants that worked in the service sector live and are dying at disproportionately high rates. It's important to recognize that, but also build a movement where everybody feels like they are part of a fight back together. So folks that are self-isolating, rather than just saying, everybody that's going out there is a hero, or, we're going to sit passively and clap and say thank you.
Right.
Why don't we build a reaction of saying we need to make demands, that we are not passive. There is something we can do. And for example, going out, if your neighborhood does this, why not go out and start a chant that we need ventilators now? Because then you're pointing out there is a reason that this is so risky for workers right now. There is a reason that we are all at risk right now. It's because our lives, politics are being played with our lives right now. So, starting something that's more proactive with a clear demand, or putting up signs in your window and waving signs during this clapping moment can help shift the consciousness of some people. And then for people, obviously, and there's other, like DSA, we're doing a ton of online organizing right now with, meetings, online planning and organizing, political education. We're doing campaigns on social media where people will like hold up signs about why we need to cancel rent, not just delay rent,
Right.
et cetera. That's one thing. But for the people that have to go out, for the people that are putting their lives on the line because of the choices of the politicians to not take seriously this crisis and employers to not take seriously this crisis, workplace organizing is incredibly important right now. And I feel a lot of hope because I look ahead. I think that we're in a very, very dangerous moment in this country. We don't know what's going to happen in November if there's an election at all. We don't know what kind of violence is going to break out before then because of all the conflict, because the economic crisis will create conflict as people get desperate. Workplace organizing, building collective consciousness and solidarity and structures based on shared struggle. And seeing that happen, by people that are literally risking their lives because they have no choice, is also incredibly important as a socialist to see happening. And I'm a trade unionist. I was a union organizer for many years. I tried to form a union in my workplace before I became a union organizer. I was a rank and file worker. And it was very scary and risky, but it was also very empowering. And as I said, people have so much at stake right now that more people are willing to stand up and demand, whether it's hazard pay or better health equipment or whatever it is. And that can be tied to larger political demands, right? It can be tied to Medicare for all. It can be tied to investing in our hospitals. It can be tied to a better relief package. But it's this fundamental unit of our society is the workplace, and it's how we can build ties between people that are different from each other but have a shared interest. So that's one reason I have hope. And anybody that is having to go out and work right now, unless you're isolated in the home, which is the case for a lot of people like home care workers, but if you're in the kind of workplace where you can organize with your coworkers, it's incredibly important to do it because nobody else will look out for your interests. And there are those of us that want to be in solidarity. And it's the biggest power that we have is together.
And clearly this crisis has shown the power that workers do have because of the terror it's created throughout the economic system, the deprivation of those workers due to social isolation. So listen, Maria Svart, I know you're really busy, and I thank you for coming on. I don't want to take any more of your time, but before we go, when this is, as soon as this segment ends, I will join DSA. I should have done it years ago. So tell me where to go so I can do that.
Yes. Yeah. So you can go to dsausa.org/join. And we actually made this really beautiful image that you can create an image to share on social media about why you're joining as well. So I really encourage everybody to join DSA. We have to be organized. This is a moment where we have to be organized.
I couldn't agree more. So Maria Svart, National Director of Democratic Socialists of America, thank you for your thoughts and insights, and thank you for coming on the program.
Again, it's great to talk with you.